Welcome to an introduction on Show 3, Boundaries and Thresholds. We will take the next few minutes to go over three aspects. One, just some technical things, what's going to happen over the 10 sessions. We'll look at the format of each session, look at the content. I'll give you some idea of what's going to be happening over the 10 sessions. The second thing we'll overview is the reason why I developed this technique or this approach, and we'll talk about the two books I've written so far. One's published, one's getting ready to publish, and that this section on boundaries and threshold is really a follow-up of book 2 leading into book 3. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then the third thing, there is some technical setup things that we need to go over. First of all, I'd just like to mention that you might notice me clicking around and popping things. Don't let that distract you too much. It's just what I have to do. I don't have a background techie, which I hope to have soon. And hopefully as we move forward, I'll have someone who will do the clicking for me, so I won't be as distracted. So again, I urge not to be, it's just the name of the game with this type of technology, that in order for me to produce it and put up the nice graphics and whatnot, I have to push buttons. So I would like to also point out that you can find out more information about who I am and what I do by visiting my website, www.stoliver.com, and there's some bio information about me and my background, some other projects. I'll give you some idea of what led me to this point to be producing this content and making it available globally. It's my belief that it's a small percentage of people who are open to this kind of approach. And they're already there. They're meditating, they're reading, they're contemplating, and they're, like, as they say, preaching to the choir. Then there's a group who would be like the group in the church who are interested, but have not really done a lot in the area, and a lot of this information may be new and challenging, which is great. And then there's a group who are just going about their day-to-day lives, they're happy with the way things are, or not, and aren't really interested in looking at alternative views of reality, the world, and what's happening to them during their life on the planet. The estimate is that the choir is about 2% of the population, and the people in the audience, the churchgoers, so to speak, the patrons, those who are interested and curious, that would be about another 8%. So it's about 10% of the population who are ready for this and interested in this material. And that's fine. I'm not trying to convince anyone to do anything other than look for themselves about what's going on in their reality. Now, as I mentioned before, I am a YouTube partner, and these videos are produced free for you, and as a partner you might notice ads, and if you see any that look of interest to you, please go ahead, feel free, click on them, because that's how Google and YouTube get funding to make this technology available, and it does provide some amount of funding to allow me to expand my services to you. So it's a voluntary thing. In addition, you might want to consider going to my website, as I showed earlier, www.stoliver, and you can access these broadcasts 3 ways. By going to my web channel, stoliver.com, Steve TV, you can register for the upcoming sessions, and you'll see a little link with the word register beside it. If you click on that, you'll go into the Google Plus account, and you can post questions to be asked during the session, and you can register to be a live participant and interact as we go forward. Second way you can do it is just to go into Google Plus and find me on Google Plus. Google for Steve Oliver, and you should be able to find me. Or, as I said, once you click on those links, the register link, it will take you to my Google account. The third way is to go to my YouTube account. Now, the YouTube account is where all of my videos are stored. Right now, there's about 60 some odd videos. Some of them are fun. Some of them are dealing with projects I've done over time. And others are dealing with these broadcasts. And there'll be playlists and whatnot, but it's a bit more, unless you're used to YouTube and used to that format, it may be a little bit confusing. But if you're used to it, great. You can do the playlist. You can look at the other videos. I suggest that you just go to my web TV site at steveoliver.com, and there it's a bit cleaner. There's only the shows there, and they're organized in such a way that you can easily watch previous shows, etc. Okay. Now, I'd like to move on to the second component, which is to talk about the content. And the content of the shows are organized in a little PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do now is to go over that PowerPoint with you. I'll just bring it up for you right now. There we are. Boundaries and thresholds. And so this is an introduction and overview to the content. And as I said before, this is an extension of my first two books, Lovebirds in the Cage, and the second to be published soon, which is As the Crow Flies. And those who are familiar with Lovebirds in the Cage know it deals with personal challenges in life. Lovebirds in the Cage introduces the idea of boundaries and how to traverse them. I like to think of the crow as being able to fly over boundaries, recognize boundaries. If you ever try to approach a crow or any animal, they know when you're approaching their boundary. So, and the third book goes into understanding thresholds. Boundaries are different than thresholds. Boundaries when you recognize you're about to change an environment. You're at the doorway. The threshold is when you're about to enter into a new environment. Okay, so that's the title, Boundaries and Thresholds, very important. And the third book goes from there and explores the implication of boundaries using a number of things. I'll go over that in a few minutes. But as a brief understanding, I view that the scientific exploration over the life of the humans on the planet, we've always been investigating reality. And it was only until Galileo began to put together a scientific approach. He did experiments. He went up on the tower and dropped a feather and a ball and noticed that to see actually I think it was two balls, a small one and a big one, and noticed they fell at the same time. So this was a long-held belief that small objects fell slower than big ones. So he started the scientific method. Prior to Galileo, there were a lot of interesting things discovered or revealed, but they were mainly by thinkers. They didn't really experiment on it. As a consequence, some of the beliefs from prior to Galileo were good, but a lot of them were based on myth and were not tested. So the scientific method began the human exploration using a verification method. And we've been working with the classical scientific method now since 1500s, mid-1500s, up until present. And each one of the discoveries about light, the discoveries about gravity, the discoveries about electromagnetic forces, these all changed our world forever. And very, very important. And sometimes we think of science as something out there, but it really is part of our lives. Then in the 20s, something happened. Albert Einstein had pushed the classical scientific method to a point where he was challenged because he couldn't put together this final integrative theory about everything, and he had difficulty. And it was Max Planck who offered a different approach to reality and came up with quantum theory. And Max Planck and Einstein argued quite a bit and were different ones. Einstein believed that the classical method, things are the way they are, and reality is what it is, and it's predictable. Max Planck said, no, there's something else out there. With quantum theory, it's different. And there were other players in the field. Niels Bohr was also very important. And these are all Nobel Prize winners, and they changed how we view the world. And there are things that we need to understand about quantum mechanics in order to understand the world around us. So we're going to look at these scientific advances because they've pushed our boundaries of understanding. And that's what the 10 sessions are about. So this will be wrapped up in my third book called The Bitter Truths. So let's look at the content. So we're going to have 10 sessions, and we're going to start out by looking at something called systems theory, which explains how organized systems, when they meet, it could be two people, it could be two bubbles. It doesn't matter whether it's physical. It could be even two different frames of thinking. It doesn't matter. Two objects, when they meet, it's explained how these two entities interact. And this is very important because as we move forward in our own personal lives, we're constantly encountering new things. We're bumping into new boundaries. So we'll just look at systems theory as it relates to your personal development. Then in order to push this understanding of systems theory further, we have to understand what we have in terms of consciousness. And I like to look at consciousness in 3 different levels. Now there may be more, it's just an approach. These are just models, and they're not perfect, but they're a way of examining the world. So we'll look at states of consciousness. And with that, we'll try to understand what are some of the ways we might process our reality cognitively. And we'll look at some alternatives there. These are related to the 90% of the population versus the 10% of the population and the 2%. They process reality differently. So the 2% of people who are meditating, contemplating, they process reality a little bit different than the 90% who are what you might say on the treadmill. We'll move then into session 4, looking at notation systems. And notation systems really has to do with how we internalize what we see. So we see a system out there and we put a label on it and we give it an internal symbol. And there are internal symbols and external symbols. Most people do not process them as that. They accept them as they are. But I think it's good to stop and be able to notate the systems that you see around you in terms of energy. So when you boil everything down, those of you who are following the meditation show 2 will see that the understanding of energy and the fact that everything is, in a way, some expression of energy. It takes energy to create your reality. So understanding energy states and being able to notate them is important. And then we'll do kind of a wrap-up of boundaries, and we'll look at managing boundaries and perhaps healing boundaries. Boundaries could be a relationship between you and another person, you and another organization, and sometimes that interaction is healthy and sometimes it isn't. So we'll look at ways that you can heal them or improve them. Then we'll move into the difference between the classical perspective of the universe or reality versus the quantum. This is quite exciting. There's some easy to understand parts that I think you'll enjoy that section. And then when we compare, go back in time thousands of years and look at how the ancients view the world or the reality and compare it to some of these current theories and sort of match up ancient views with classical views and quantum view of the world, and to give some perspective how we have developed our thinking process and our evaluation process. In session 9, I'm going to try to wrap up all the previous 8 sessions and look at just some general lifestyle guidelines. How can we use the ancient views, the classical view, and the quantum view to our advantage? They're not exclusive. They can be merged. They can be used, and they're valid depending on what you're doing. And then to wrap it up, we're going to look at some of the key contributors who have offered a lot of understanding for quantum. They've introduced it and where that is going. And the topics related to that there's been a change in how we view time. Time is viewed differently now. Einstein started that when he said that time and space are integrated and that they're both relative. We'll look at light, and light is becoming quite an interesting area of investigation for the meditator, for the contemplator, and for the scientist. We'll talk about light. Then there's the idea that nothing is staying still. Nothing remains fixed in the universe. Everything is moving. But it's moving in a rather mysterious way. It's spinning. So we'll look at the spin of the universe at the very macro, small level, and at the micro at the small level, at the macro at the large level. We'll look at what is this spin of the universe, and how does it relate to us? And finally, we'll look at a topic called The Matrix. This is an interesting, some of you may have seen the movie The Matrix, where reality is considered to be a projection. And with the advance of systems, MRI scanning systems, we can watch the brain in real time. They've discovered that something happens before you perceive it. There's something that goes on inside the brain before you actually perceive something consciously. And that delay is as long as 6 or 7 seconds. So it's quite a delay. Your brain is doing something, and then you perceive it. So we'll look at that in terms of what they call the holographic universe. The session 1 will be, as I said, about systems theory, and that will be the next session. So again, I covered some of the practical aspects of this series of 10 sessions. I talked about the format and the content. And then the final little piece I want to leave you with is why I feel this is important. If we lived in a world without boundaries and thresholds, we wouldn't be able to distinguish anything. One important aspect of distinguishing your reality is the understanding of color and light. Now, light itself is invisible, and what we experience as color is really done in the mind. And this has been proven over and over again, that the color that you see around you isn't in the object, it's in your mind. And this is proven by the fact that some people are colorblind and they can see different colors than you see. They look at a stoplight, red, amber, and green, and they see different colors than you. Now, unfortunately, it's a small percentage, but it's in our DNA. We're programmed to see color, and the primary reason is survival. This is a survival adaptation that we can better distinguish things if they have different colors. So that's just one aspect of understanding the importance of boundaries. There's another aspect that goes even deeper. As you are pushing yourself and developing your skills through meditation, through reading, through watching videos like this and interacting, you may find yourself at a boundary, at a threshold. And those people who are fortunate to be able to recognize that they're at a threshold, recognize the specific physiological process that happens when you go through a threshold of change. Some people don't go through change and didn't even realize they changed. Well, that could happen. Some people get to a threshold and they back away, they get afraid. So we're gonna, the whole 10 sessions are really about being able to recognize a boundary, recognize when you're at a threshold, and to enter the new system should you choose to, and to take greater advantage of your experience. So this is really a toolkit. 10 sessions are really a toolkit to give you a few more options in how you process your day-to-day reality. And I really want this not to be just a mind-blowing type of experience where you walk away scratching your head saying, what was that? I want you to walk away saying, oh, that was interesting. Here's some tools that maybe I can use, some practical day-to-day tools. So with that, I will let you go. And again, I do want to mention that you should not be distracted. In fact, I have to click around and push buttons. That's just what I have to do. And this should get smoother as we progress and do more in the area of these shows. So go to my website, register for the next show, which will be on session 1, dealing with boundaries, with systems theory and boundaries. So I think that's about it. You can post messages to me on my website, on my Google account, and of course, if you go through YouTube, you can post comments and questions there as well. So have a great day, and thank you for watching this overview of boundaries in 3D.